Hi folks. In this week's tech tip, I wanted to just talk you through a relatively new feature of Docs, which, on reflecting on how I used Docs myself, I think is actually potentially really useful, particularly for educators where we're trying to share a lot of information, quite often as reference material, but it's not something we're necessarily going to print out as an actual handout. And given that we're using Chromebooks, which have a relatively wide and not very tall screen, particularly in addition to the fact that we've got all this other stuff at the top, that means the actual frame that we have for presenting information is quite small. So this is just a kind of a sample document I've got here. And you'll see that I've got a nice big image here of the Colosseum, but it won't fit in the page. And I've got a table here, but to make the information all fit in the table, I'd need to make the cells narrower or just essentially run out of space. So there's a kind of a solution to that in that if you go to File, Page Setup, and use Pageless, the boundaries that are kind of created in a doc that are assuming that it's to be printed as a document on a given paper size are now removed. And so whatever device the person's looking at it on, whether it's a phone, a Chromebook, tablet, whatever, it will essentially use the whole width of the page and it will kind of resize to fit that space. So it just means that you can use the space on a screen as effectively as possible, and you don't have lots of individual pages with lots of wasted space around the edges. That means lots of scrolling to find things and being limited in terms of how big you can make your images or your charts or tables or things like that. So you just select Pageless. You can change the background color if you so wish, and you'll see at the bottom you can also set it as a default option. Now you can change back, it's not irreversible, but just be aware that if you change from a document that currently is set up to have pages to pageless, you'll lose page numbers and headers and footers. And I also don't think it works with columns. But as I say, when you go back to pages, it just reverts to as before. So if we click OK here, initially it won't really seem like it's made a huge difference. I mean, there's a bit more width. It's just the edges of the page have disappeared. But one of the really handy things, if you go to View, in pageless mode, you can choose the width. So we can make that wide, and that will now make the text width much wider. So we use the full width for our page here. And you can see that now if I wanted to extend that table, I've got loads of room over at the side here that I can expand that out and make it wider with. Now, in terms of navigating a document, you might find it a bit annoying to not have pages and page numbers because you might be directing students to go to a specific page, and that becomes difficult if there's no pages. So what I would encourage you to remember is that the contents, the document outlines it's called, I think of it as a table of contents, at the side here is automatically generated based on you using heading formatting in your text. So when you're creating different sections, you'll see at the top here, it shows that this is the title and it says part one and then part two. And that's simply just done by when we put these little headings in, using the formatting options up here for titles and headings. And from that, we'll then automatically generate this kind of summary here, and let you use that essentially to navigate a document. So you can just go to a specific part of it without having to hunt through page numbers. So I thought this was quite a useful addition. Certainly, bearing in mind that pretty much all the docs that I produce now, I'm not likely to print them off, and they're most likely going to be viewed on a screen. So I think it makes it more easy for people to view the content and for you to include more detail, particularly with pictures. So hopefully that was useful to you. If you've got any questions, give us a wee shout, and hopefully we'll have something interesting for you next week.